Hey guys, what is up? My name is Kaylee. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are getting into my messy as hell September wrap up. So I say messy as hell because I DNF'd 3 books. One of them is definitely a DNF. The other 2 are possibilities to revisit later, but I just wasn't in the right mood for them at the time, and I don't want to force myself to read something that maybe I'll love when I'm in a mood that is more for it. Because otherwise, I did read, I think, 15 things, which is a lot. A lot of them were audiobooks or ebooks, so I only have a handful to show you physically, and I've got some feelings and some what's the word I'm looking for? Some feelings about a book that is very beloved that I did not love, that I expected to love. So let's just get into it. So I have 1 3-star read, 2 4-star reads, and the rest, which are, well, 12 5-star reads. So I think the thing that happened that makes it weighted so heavily in the positive is that this month, when I wasn't feeling something, instead of letting it totally wreck me and get super slumpy, I just put it down. And I think that's something I really need to coach myself into doing more often, because I end up spending time on things I actually truly enjoy. I did fall into a slump at some point, and then I went and reread via audio a ton of books, and that really helped. So we'll see what that is later, because I always do my rereads at the beginning of my 5 stars. So let's just get into the 3-star, because that is obviously the opinion that is off from most other people's opinions that I've seen so far on Booktube. Actually, real quick, let me talk about the DNFs. I'll only give you a brief reason why I either DNF'd or put it aside, because I don't want to spend too much time on negativity. But first and foremost, the cover's upstairs, but I did end up DNFing Strange Grace by Tessa Gratton. This was a reread, or not a reread, this is a buddy read with Lacey over Lacey D. Bell. She's one of my best friends, and I felt so bad. This is the first time we've ever decided to buddy read a book, and we've been like talking about it for close to a year, and we were just gonna wait till fall to do it. So we did, and I just couldn't get into it. I understand the representation of like polyamory, and there's some good rep in here, but the plot of the story just wasn't drawing me in. I read a good portion of it. I read like 120 or so pages, probably more than that, almost halfway, and I just didn't care. I thought it was weird and not well paced, and it didn't, weird stuff was happening. It just wasn't for me. And some of the people that I love dearly absolutely love this book, but I am not one of them. So I DNF'd that. This is my real, like, this is the true, I won't pick this up again because I just wasn't feeling it. Then the other book that I was really anticipating that I ended up putting aside because I think that in the right mood, I'm really going to like it. But the writing style for where I was in my slump in the year, and I'd followed an epic fantasy with another epic fantasy, and I struggled through both of them, so I feel like I needed the break from fantasy, and so I took it. And that is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I can never pronounce this right. Muir. I got relatively far in. What was it? 115 pages in. The writing style is very, it's a lot of long paragraphs and little action, and I think that because I followed up my 3-star fantasy read with this, it just wasn't, I wasn't feeling it. And I want to give it a go when I want a fantasy. So this is a temporary put down, not necessarily a DNF, because I did enjoy the humor and the characters so far. It just wasn't the right time for me. So I've been trying this year to read my pre-orders as they come in, and that's why I picked it up immediately, knowing that I was in a like weird state after my, I'm just gonna say, a Dark Dawn read. So I shouldn't have done that, and I will get back to this, just not right now. Maybe closer in winter when I'm feeling something dark. And another DNF halfway through that possibly I'll pick up again, but I'll have to really be in the mood, and that is Fixer Up by Tessa Bailey. The only character that was redeeming in this was Georgie. The main character is cute, and she's like headstrong, and she like didn't give a fuck about people. She wanted what she wanted. She was happy with what made her happy. Fuck everybody else. Love that about her. I think, okay, so I got through like, I got to finally the like very first smutty scene, and I think it was well done, and I think that I would appreciate that aspect of the book if I continued on, but it was all the other stuff, the relationships with the family, and the way that Travis, the main character, kept like pulling back into himself to talk to himself about how this is his best friend's little sister. I was like, get over it, dude. Get over it. Want her or you don't want her. I don't know. It just, I wasn't feeling it. And because I was in the middle of a readathon that I wanted to get 7 and 7 done, I was like, you know what? This is really, really, I don't even want to pick it up. So I just switched to On the Come Up, and it was a better choice for me at the time. So it's a current put down, not necessarily a DNF. If I do get back to it, I will let you guys know, but I don't know when that'll be. Okay, now as for the books that I completed and can give you legit opinions about, we'll start off here. My one and only 3-star read of the month was Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. Trust me, no one is more disappointed with this than I am that I didn't give it a 5-star. Nevernight, phenomenal. God's Grave, my favorite book of the year probably. And then Dark Dawn. And I don't want to harp on it for too long because I did like it enough that I finished it, and I'm glad it's concluded, and it had its quirky humor and characters that are very beloved, but how can I sum it up without going too hard into it? I feel like this book, more than the other two, got really into Jay's head as he wrote it about what the community loved and expected post writing Nevernight and God's Grave, and they're like gaining popularity and what fans and readers focused on. I think he took that and put a lot of that into Dark Dawn to the point where I could feel it. Like, I felt like it got adjusted because of the fandom, which isn't always a bad thing. And like, I think Leah on the Offbeat did the same thing, where it just didn't wrap up the way that I expected it to. The story didn't go where I had thought because expectations of the fandom were set, and the authors, like, I can't imagine having to write something knowing what people thought of the initial books. So I'm like not in a million years gonna say that Jay failed, because he didn't. This is a marvelous fantasy about quite a loved character. Mia Corvera is still Mia Corvera. It wasn't for me. If you are all about the relationship that happens in book 2 in God's Grave, I don't want to give anything away. But if you are all for that relationship, then you're going to love this. And I think that that is the difference between people who really loved Dark Dawn and people who didn't particularly love it, is if you didn't buy into that relationship in book 2, then book 3 is like almost all about it. And that's the other thing, is I think it became very heavy in the like love and romance and relationship aspect, and the rest of the plot line, the whole point, the revenge story was there, but it drug. To get from where Mia starts in this book to the end of the book took a long time. It took me 9 to 10 days to read this, and I mean, I even read Priory of the Orange Tree in like less than a week. So fantasy at most tends to take me a full week, typically a lot less than that, 4 to 5 days. So this really drug, and it put me in a slump, and I'm sorry that I didn't like it. I'm sorry to myself. I'm not apologizing to anyone watching this, because my opinions are my own, and at this point you know that, but I wanted to love this and I didn't. So that's all I'll say about Dark Dawn. I'd still say if you liked the first 2 books, check this one out, but for me it was a 3-star. Then I have 2 4-stars. I started this book right before ContemporaryAThon. It had been initially on the ContemporaryAThon TBR, but then I wanted to switch it out with something else, which I didn't even get to, but I will eventually. That is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. I really love Katrina Leno. There's only one story of hers that I've read and not absolutely adored in some aspect. Yes, I've given a book or 2 3 stars, but generally speaking, Katrina Leno usually hits it out of the park. I love magical realism, and this book is no exception. She writes very contemporary driven with sides of magical realism stories. This is a pretty harrowing story about a girl whose family's falling apart because her mom has a drinking problem and her dad has had an affair and her sister leaves. So it's just basically her fending for herself. She's in high school and she doesn't want her like friends, her new friends, to know the truth about her life. And there's like a whole magical realism aspect to it that I don't want to give away, but essentially there's like a second place that she creates and can visit. And it was cool. I didn't love the ending, and that's the only reason that it didn't get a 5-star, is because there's a friendship that this girl has grown up with, and it falls apart in the beginning, right when the rest of her life is falling apart. And it very much reminded me of my own childhood best friend. She and I did have a falling out several years ago, and I do think it was for the best. And it was the same kind of scenario as this, where like once the friendship was over, the main character kind of like starts to understand all the ways in which it wasn't really a very good friendship in the first place. It was a little toxic, but like that person kind of has like a part in the end, and this isn't giving anything away, but that's what I didn't like about it. I just didn't think it wrapped up well. So that was a 4-star, but otherwise, like, I read this, I didn't want to put it down. I read it in 2 days, which is pretty fast for me, especially this month. My favorite is still Summer of Salt, but this is very good. My next 4-star is Bloom by Kevin Panetta. I love Kevin Panetta. His graphic novels, Zodiac Star Force, are some of my favorite. This is a very strong 4-star. The only reason I didn't get 5 stars is that I felt like it was not very high stakes and it was pretty quick. But it's a teenage love story about 2 guys who fall in love over baking, basically, and I don't want to get too much into the plot because I did talk about it in ContemporaryAThon, both first and second vlog, so if you need to know more about it, go ahead and check that out, but it was a very strong 4-star. So now we're going to get into the epic 5-star reads. I reread 5 different books via audiobook, so I'm just going to quickly go over those. I didn't grab the quartet that I reread from my room, and my baby's sleeping, so we're just gonna have to insert pictures here, but I did reread for the read-along of The Diviners, Layer of Dreams by Libba Bray. I listened to it on audiobook because the narrator is just phenomenal. I cannot wait to read Before the Devil Breaks You, which starts tomorrow, October 1st. I doubt I'll have the I'm in line number 2 for the audiobook, so I probably won't read it when I'm supposed to, but I will get it done next month. 5-star read. I liked it more this time than I liked it the first time. I gave it a 5-star the first time, but it's definitely a stronger 5-star the second time. It's my least favorite in the trilogy, which says a lot. The amount of foreshadowing that was in this is just as much as in The Diviners. And I don't know, Libba Bray is just a genius. This continues on from The Diviners, but you get more characters, and I can't give you too much because if you haven't read The Diviners, talking about Layer of Dreams is going to ruin a lot of things, but the additional characters make the story even stronger, and I just love this cast of characters, and I honestly cannot wait for February when the 4th book comes out, and I believe the final book, because I just want to see where it goes, and I absolutely loved it. When I was done with Layer of Dreams, I was in my slump because Dark Dawn had just ended as well, and like I needed something to pull me out of it. So on Hoopla, The Raven Cycle was available, all 4 books, so I read The Raven Boys and what's next? Why can't I think of all the names right now? Well, anyway, I read The Raven Cycle, all 4 books, 5-starred them. It was my first reread of them since reading them, so if The Diviners is one of my favorite series ever, especially, like, let's say it's my favorite YA series, then The Raven Cycle comes right below it, because I also love these characters so much. It's the first time I've reread the books though, and the amount of foreshadowing that Maggie Stiefvater put into this is also mind-blowing. Libba Bray does it a little more masterfully, but I also think The Diviners reads a little bit older, a little more in-depth than The Raven Boys, but like, I loved it. I loved it. I know some people really don't like the ending of The Raven Cycle, but I think it's fine. Like, it could it have gone more high stakes and had like more of a climax? Absolutely. But I'm not one of those people that really couldn't stand the end of it and rated the last lower, because I didn't. All 5 stars for me. Really loved it. Pulled me out of my slump. I was able to read a lot more because of that. So thank you to the Raven Cycle for breaking my mid-September slump. Now on to the 5 stars that were new reads for me. I, after the Raven Cycle, downloaded and listened to All Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This is a nonfiction story. You've probably heard about it, but it's about the Golden State Killer. She basically spent a lot of her life loving true crime and looking into true crime, and she stuck with this one serial rapist slash murderer that happened in Golden State, California, and it's just basically essays about research she did and things she found out, and she actually died before the book was published, so like her editor and other people had to help piece together her notes to finish the book up. But it was riveting, and I'm not a big nonfiction fan, but it was so good. Trigger warnings for like everything, because truly it's a very dark story, and this person, the Golden State Killer, was brutal. I listened to this on audiobook while I was like walking my son on our daily walks in the stroller, and that was kind of a bad call, because it gets really creepy at some points, and I'm like this very petite woman with like this cumbersome stroller trying to walk and listen to people get murdered, and it was probably not the best choice, but I really enjoyed it. So I'd say a soft 5 stars. I'm not a big nonfiction person, so I can't really speak to whether it's like typical good nonfiction, but I enjoyed it enough that a 5-star felt appropriate, so I gave it 1. Next, I read Fence volumes 2 and 3, both 5 stars. I am a huge softie for this series so far. It's literally just a series about boys trying out for a fencing team for a school, and 2 of them are high stakes because they need to make the team in order to attend the school, and they love fencing, and one of them is like ranked 2nd in the nationals, and the other is just biologically good at fencing, but he's not the most pristine in his movements and his, all of that. And so like they're both battling but also becoming friends, and it's just such a cute little story, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Total 5 stars, easy reads. Hoopla had them, so I read them because I like graphic novels when I'm feeling slumpy, right? That's what I do. Next, I read another graphic novel series that is for free on Webtoons, and I mean, I clearly will recommend this to BTS fans if you haven't yet found yourself in the alternate universe that BTS and Big Hit has created themselves. This is not like a fan fiction. This is something that Big Hit, the agency that runs BTS, did, and it is about the guys, and it's an alternate reality where they aren't BTS, but they all still are a part of each other's lives. It is very dark. There is death, there is depression, there is suicide, there is mental illness. It is a ride. Like when I first started reading the webcomic, I like screenshot some of it and sent it to my husband, and I was like, what the fuck? And he was like, what are you reading? So I'm excited because it does carry on to a 2nd volume, which is not a graphic novel. It is literally a physical book, so I hope to read that soon. I'm thinking Melanie from Mel to the Any and I are gonna buddy read it together, possibly. It hasn't been set in stone, but it has been discussed, so fingers crossed. I gave it 5 stars. I think even if you're not a BTS fan, you might be able to appreciate it for what it's worth, because it was a really good graphic novel, if you're okay with something as dark as that was, because it has nothing to do with BTS as BTS. So how does this keep happening? It always ends up coming back around. Regardless, 5 stars. There's not much more to say about it. Just know that it is very dark if you do it, check it out. But it is free on Webtoons. My next 5-star is, so that the final 3 5 stars are all part of ContemporaryAThon, so I won't get too far into them. I won't talk at nauseum. This will be probably the shortest wrap-up I've ever done. But On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, story about Bree, who wants to be a rapper, who lives in Garden Heights. So it's the same neighborhood as Star from The Hate You Give. And it's the choices she makes as a teenager to get where she wants to be in her rap career, which are not always the best choices. And she has to like face the consequences and be honest with herself and her family. And it's just really good. I think that if you don't like rap or hip hop, You might not love this as much as I did, but it's one of the main genres of music that I listen to. So I really felt it. I actually laughed because they talked about how the biggest people that like buy and listen to hip hop and rap are white suburban kids, and like, hi, hello, me, yeah, my whole life. So I felt that, but obviously its own voices, and I can't speak to the feelings of the racism that happened in the book, but Angie Thomas has a way of telling the truth and also making you don't really feel, I don't know how to say this. I don't know. She has a really good way of showing the minute ways that racism happens still to this day for anybody who's not white in the United States. And it doesn't focus as heavily as it did in The Hate You Give. Like, the whole story is about racism and police brutality in that, whereas this is more about a girl's journey of becoming herself and who she is, but also because she's a Black young woman in a school that is primarily white with some Black and Latinx kids that do deal with racism because of their skin color within that school. It's a part of who Bree is, and it's a very important part of the story, but it is not the story. Really liked it. Total 5-star. Listen to the audiobook. The narrator is really good. Totally recommend it. My next 5-star is Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. YA really came through for me this month, which is funny because I keep being like, I don't think I should read YA, but maybe it's just fantasy YA. Loved it. This is a story about a girl. It's like a coming of age, like finding love and friendship and a love for boy bands and video gaming and like a World of Warcraft, like an MMORPG type style. If any of that sounds good to you, you might love this book. If you're not into boy bands or gaming, this might not be the book for you, but if you do relate to any of those things, you're gonna love it. I absolutely loved it. I related very hard. It does take place in a suburb of Chicago, which that's where I am. When she goes and sees the boy band that she like becomes into live, it's literally at the stadium where I've seen NSYNC and I saw BTS, and I've spent many concerts there or just days there. So I like really felt this book. It touched my heart. That's really where we're going with it. And because I read it during ContemporaryAThon, I'm not going to go too much into it because you can watch either vlogs 1 or 2, and I will have a synopsis and a wrap up and my active feelings as I'm reading it, but super good. And my favorite book of the month, which Lacey's gonna love, and I read this specifically because it was beloved by her and it's part of the Challenges for ContemporaryAThon, but that is Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. This story is so good and hard-hitting. It made me cry quite a few times, also while I was walking with the baby because I listened to it on audiobook. So I was that crazy lady walking around, pushing a stroller, crying under my sunglasses multiple times throughout last week. But I loved it. I won't get too far into it yet again, but it starts with a girl who is adopted, wants to find her birth mother, finds out she also has biological siblings from the same birth mother, and it's about them coming together and meeting each other and growing together and growing separately, and it's just so good. It's so good, and it's the right amount of heart-wrenching. It's also so heartwarming, and I just absolutely loved it. If you want to hear more thoughts, watch those vlogs, as I said, but this was my favorite book of the month, without a doubt. Yeah, so that is it from me. That is my September wrap-up. I hope that October is... I had a really good reading month, so I'm like, why am I so upset about the slumps I was in? I don't know. I had a really great reading month. That's a lot of 5 stars. That's a lot of 4 stars. There's nothing... I don't know. DNFing or setting aside books is like the new way to do it for me, I think. So we'll see what happens in October. Thank you for being here, guys. Let me know what your favorite and least favorite reads are in September. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my opinions on these books. Let's have discussions. I hope you guys are doing well. Like if you've liked this video, subscribe if you are new here and would like to see more content from me. I post all my social media links down below. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Goodreads. I love you guys. I hope you're doing well. I'll see you in the next one.